What's happening, everybody? How you doing? Got Kevin Chown, Nick Adams. Y'all know Ernesto Homeyer. Welcome back to the Recording Ninja Workshop here at Ultimate Studios, Inc. We got a fun thing planned today. But first, be sure to please like this, because apparently when you hit the little like button, it pushes things out in the stream a little bit better. You guys want to take a quick break? Sure. Cool. They'll be back in a second, because first, I got a good buddy of mine today and a mentor for years in the recording thing, Scott Francisco. Come out, brother.
Hello, YouTube.
Is he unmuted there, Ernesto? Cool. All right. You guys know Scott, full on drums. You've seen him plenty of times there. But what we're going to do today is we're going to do something. This isn't going to be my workflow or anything at all. This is going to be about the way Scott works, because you've done you've done a lot of albums. You've done Puddle of Mudd. Who else did you work with? Blues Travelers.
Yep.
A few others.
Jaguares, that was a good one.
Yep. And you worked at that gorgeous studio over in North
Third
Hollywood.
Stone. Yeah, Third
Stone was killer. But you've also done a ton of TV and movie work. You worked on the new Geostorm movie, for one, that came out.
Yeah.
Sons of Anarchy, you did some work with, I think Charlie Sidner was also on that one with you. But then Malcolm in the Middle for years, also with Charlie.
You played drums on some of the Malcolm stuff.
I got to play a little bit. And we did some stuff for Drinky Crow.
Yeah, Drinky Crow show.
Cartoon Network, I think.
That was a Cartoon Network show. Also, we do stuff for.
There's a lot. If you look in the description of this video, I think I listed a bunch of these things. It's it's Fox, HBO, ABC, Cartoon Network. It's all over the place. And
Music
in that
libraries.
time, oh yeah,
Music libraries. Yeah.
And besides me being his favorite drummer to track, that's not true.
No,
I would have to probably say Ndugu.
Well, when I can get him.
Yeah, Ndugu's pretty badass. One of the things that I always love noticed and was really impressed with when we did these sessions is how fast we worked. I mean, everything, you came in and it was boom, boom, it was very efficient, but stuff always sounded good and it never felt unorganized or disorganized or like we were just working at this feverish pace. It's just boom, you come in, it's all ready to rock, books, charts in front of you, and you're off and running.
You cannot afford to be disorganized, because in that situation, time is literally money.
Yes.
You have a bunch of a room full of musicians, expensive musicians on the clock. There is and you got 3 hours to knock out 10 or 15 minutes of music. That's that. That's all you got. So you have to be efficient. You can't afford to waste any time at all, and you have to keep things moving. You just got to mow cues down.
And it still has to sound good on top of it. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to go through his workflow that he uses almost all the time. Now, the last time I worked at East West, it was exactly like this with you.
Pretty much.
So he's going to go through that, relate some of this to how you can do it at home, just see it. We're going to walk through the whole setup. Then we're going to record a short cue at the end of this. So everybody's got charts. Just before we went live, everybody was rehearsing this. So they've got it down, ready to rock. And so we'll get to kind of hear the end product after that. But, I'm not going to go through your workflow. You know it better than me. So you want to... Sure. I'm going to go move the camera around a little bit here so we can zoom in on some of this stuff and go for it.
Right.
Cool.
I'll talk about the sessions here for a second, too. When you're doing a film and TV project, very often you'll get the finished picture you're working to, like a half hour TV show or something like that. And you'll make a master session, you'll put the video in there, you'll take the audio from the video, which is usually the dialogue and effects on one side, and the temp music on the other side. You split those apart so you can reference the temp music when you need to, and you can turn it off when you're working. You make a big master session, and then all these cues or individual sessions derive from that master session. You just move your song start to wherever the cue starts. and that's where you go. So when we're doing a session like this, we basically have a whole bunch of sessions ready to go, templates put in. There's no time to be messing around with outputs, templates like that. You make your template session, you import all those tracks into each of these mini sessions, you get all that stuff ready to go before the session. All the hard work happens before the session starts. So the night before, the day before, I'll usually send over the material if it's ready to go. I'll send over a plot of the space, as we see here, where I want the musicians, what microphones I want for every instrument, where I want them patched on the console, any outboard that I want patched in, although usually I don't use a ton. I don't really bring much outboard equipment to the session because there's really not time to mess around with it usually. Sometimes I'll bring my own mics because then I know I don't have to worry about.
But hold on, the mics, but you also, what's the one piece of gear that you always take to every session?
The speakers. I always bring my speakers. I have my Tannoy 600As that I love that nobody has. That's not something you can expect any studio to have. So I always just bring them with me. So I'm recording on the same speakers. I'm going to mix the stuff on eventually if I'm mixing it, and it's familiar speakers no matter where I go. I always have something familiar to listen to on. Not that I'm not familiar with NS10s or Gentle X or whatever, but I like those better. So that's what I bring with me. I've had them I think I've had those for almost 20 years. Well, not the same pair, but I've been using those for like 20 years. They're hard to find now because they quit making them. Anyway, so what we're doing today is it's a comedy cue from a cartoon that I actually wrote way back when. We never used it, so we could use it for this, so there's no copyright problems, which is great. And it's basically like a funky little rhythm section thing, and there are some pre-recorded elements along with the live guys. So we're sort of incorporating a little bit of everything into this. There's some MIDI instruments, there's some real guys. There's also MIDI demo versions of what's here, because when these cues get written, if you're going to do a session, you don't want to go to the trouble and expense of recording live musicians for a cue that the director doesn't like or the producer's not going to like. So you make demos of everything, you get them to sign off on the demos, then you go to the studio. And then you hope for the best, that nothing gets thrown out. So what we have here today, we have bass, drums, and guitar, right? We have Ernesto, we have Kevin, and we have Nick. Kevin, playing his Music Man 5-string, is going direct into a Little Labs DI, no amplifier. Best isolation that way. I can always reamp it later if I need to. Most likely, if I was going to do something like that, I would probably use a plug-in because usually I'm mixing these cues in as much a hurry as we record them. But that way we get, Music Mans are great for this because they just sound great plugged into a DI box, which is awesome. Oh, there it is. Matches Charlie's shirt. So that's very simple. It's going into a 160X, little 4:1 compression, just to get it to sit a little better. And then for the drums, pretty simple 4-piece kit. I'm using a single kick drum mic. This really helps speed things up. You don't have to deal with any phase issues. You don't have to worry about rebalancing later. But what I do is I have a 421 here. I have it outside of the hole a little bit, so I can still pick up some front head, like if I had a second mic on it. So that's a great way to sort of simplify your kick drum situation. Still sounds great. For the snare drum, we have my favorite, one of the old Unidyne SM57s that were made in the early half of the 80s or earlier, the gray ones. Much more open sounding than the current 57s. They don't have the same low end, but for a snare drum, that's not a big deal. That was also, if you watched last week's snare mic shootout, it's the same one from that. Can I have it back after this?
No.
No, you
I'm
can't.
keeping that microphone.
They're actually pretty expensive now if you look on
They're
eBay.
$250
yeah,
now.
It's nuts. I'm really glad I held on to a few. Underneath the snare, we have an Audio-Technica AE3000, which is a condenser instrument mic with the pad on, obviously. It's a pretty good bottom of the snare mic. Of course, pretty much anything will work on the bottom of the snare in a pinch. For the hi-hat, we have a PR30. Now, this is kind of this is not a choice you see every day, but we shot some video for Heil not too long ago, and we used all Heil mics, and we used this on the hi-hat, and Charlie and I were both very impressed. And the pickup pattern is so narrow on this microphone that just if you just tweak it a little bit, you can completely change your hi-hat sound. It's crazy how focused it was, and the off-axis rejection is great, so it's great for bleed. So that's really great. And
yeah, it was actually amazing. You could have multiple hi-hat sounds with one mic.
Yeah, it was great, and that's for a situation like this. That's great because we're only doing one piece of music here because we don't want this thing to be 4 hours long. But in a session like this, over the course of 3 hours, especially for a comedy thing, you could be going through all these different genres. You could be doing all kinds of different things, but you really only have time to do one setup. So as versatile as that setup can be, for drums, you can keep it very basic and very, very versatile, and let the players do the work as far as getting the sounds that the composer wants. That's the way to go. And with this way, if we did want to tweak the hi-hat sound, all we got to do, boop, boop, just flip it around. There we go. We can get all kinds of different stuff. We also have PR30s on the toms, industry standard, everybody's favorite. For the overheads, we have sort of it's kind of the Massenburg arrangement, more or less. Audio-Technica 4047s, the multi-pattern ones, but they're just set to cardioid, so we could have used the regular cardioid ones, same difference. I don't have the pads on. I've managed to get away with not using the pads. But this is, it's a little bit skewed this way for the traditional Massenburg setup that I'm sure you've seen Charlie use a million times. And if we were doing a lot of different stuff, I might do some sort of coincident pair or something, but this seemed to work really good for this setup, so we left it. And then for guitar, Ernesto playing a custom Strat-style guitar with 2 humbuckers into a super reverb with basically a clean sound and some wah-wah. I have a Cascade Fathead 2. The Fathead, one of my favorite mics for guitar cabinets. Especially, again, it's very neutral sounding. It's got that smooth ribbon top end, but it's very neutral sounding, and it's very forgiving. Unlike a lot of dynamics like 57 stuff like that, you put a dynamic on a speaker cone, you move it a little bit, and it can sound, completely different. Whereas with the ribbon mics, you put it in front of the speaker, it sounds like the speaker sounds like 5 feet away. You don't have to really, you can move it around and color it a little bit, but it doesn't have that radical coloration. And when you're dealing with a session like this where usually I'm not even placing the microphones, the assistant's running out placing all the microphones, Fathead is kind of a no-brainer, and I know I'm going to get what I need to get. And then the fourth position over here, which is actually we're not really using because I'm the composer and the engineer, so I can't be in 2 places at once. But usually in a session like this, the composer or someone the composer hires to conduct will have his own station out on the floor with the musicians, with the score, keeping the musicians in line, answering any questions, listening for wrong notes, all that kind of stuff. So there's a pair of ears out here that can interface with the musicians directly, and then there'll usually also be a pair of ears in the control room listening for other things. And between the 2 of them, hopefully you catch any weird stuff. You catch any wrong notes for sure, stuff like that. But you can catch, if someone's not really playing stylistically exactly how you want, or you want a different sound, sometimes that's hard to hear in the headphones, so you need someone in the control room. So usually if the composer's out here, he's got a guy in the control room. I do that a lot for guys. Or if the composer's in the control room, then he's got a guy out here conducting. And also, a lot of times composers have, crews of guys that work for them and, ghostwriting, doing orchestration, stuff like that. So a lot of times the guy who did the orchestration, it makes sense for him to be out here with the musician so the composer can worry about what the end result sounds like. All right.
Now, hey, last thing, over there in front of the guitar, you've got...
Oh, the gobo, yeah. So we got the guitar baffled off a little bit here, just to keep it out of the drums as much as possible. You'll also notice we don't have any room mics on the drums. This is kind of a tight... if you heard the jam at the beginning of the program, that's not too different than what we're doing for the cue. So we kind of wanted a tight, funky drum sound. It's not really a room mic thing anyway. But in general, I would kind of not do room mics for something like this because you're just going to, if you have a bunch of guys playing in the room, you're just going to kind of pick up a bunch of that stuff, and it's not necessarily the most useful thing when you're mixing. So it's a lot of times easier just to not have room mics, and we'll do it with, if you need to add ambience, we can do it with reverbs and stuff later on when we're mixing. So yeah, we just put this gobo here to keep it out of the drums a little bit. The other nice thing about a ribbon mic too is that even though it's figure 8, so you get a lot in the back end, on the sides you get very little. So I love using ribbon mics on brass players. So you can have 2 trumpets right next to each other mic'd with ribbon mics, and you get barely any bleed from the 2 of them. And as long as there's not something on the other side of the ribbon mic making a bunch of noise going in the back of it, it sounds great. And the smooth top end is great on brass too. So that's kind of a usual thing I do. All right, so should we go in the control room, Charlie? And
yeah, why don't we do
that going?
this? Let's. Why don't we walk through the sounds of each instrument separately so they can hear them?
Okay.
Or maybe actually, what would be better? Why don't we do it? Have them come out and play something like they did on the intro, and then we can just mute
Solo them up.
Yeah, solo things up. They can hear the guitar. You can hear the bleed or lack thereof bleed, and just get an idea for the instruments before we bust into the track.
Right on.
And then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to make the point too that for sessions like this, we send, I'll send the stuff in the night before. So like say if the session's at 10 a.m., I'd be there by 8 o'clock with my speakers. When I walk in, I expect to basically see this minus the instruments. All the mics patched, buzzed out, everything's working, waiting for the instruments to show up. And then all we got to do, hopefully the drummer's stuff shows up at least an hour in advance. Maybe if we're really lucky, the drummer will show up in an hour in advance.
I always did.
Yeah, well, yeah, but if with
I
cartridge,
like hanging out in the studio.
the cartridge guys will always be on time. That's their business. Sometimes the drummers roll in at the last minute, or they're coming from another gig if it's a later session.
Or they just woke up.
Yeah, or whatever. But the idea is that at downbeat, everything's ready to go. I've got my drum sounds. I either had somebody hit the drums, or hopefully the drummer hit the drums, because that can make a big difference sometimes. I got the drums dialed in. As all the other musicians show up, I know their mics, their DIs are working. I have them play real quick. I get their sounds, and generally in about half an hour, you get everything. You get all your sounds up. I mean, it is turn.
I don't think we ever did a sound check longer than, I think a half an hour is on the long side.
Yeah.
I remember doing literally for the entire band, 5-minute drums, done, is good.
Yeah.
Bass, guitar, the whole thing, and 20 minutes later, we're actually hitting record.
Yeah, and that's why you need a standard setup that and you know what it's going to sound like, and all you got to do is wait for the instruments to show up, slide the instruments in there, and you're ready to go. That's essential for this kind of work, and especially if you're doing a date with 35 guys or 110 guys, then it starts to get really.
Yeah, if you're doing an orchestra, it's a whole different.
Yeah, well,
thing.
orchestra is its own animal, but and the different combinations of instruments sometimes can make things more or less complicated too. Like whenever you're dealing with drums, it gets more complicated because it takes a while to dial a drum kit in.
Later, I'll try to find. I have photos from that last time I worked with you down at East West. I'll see if I can find some photos and throw it up on the YouTube channel, or even over on the Facebook page. But I had the drums were on one wall, and about 8 feet in front of me was the grand piano with Charlie playing.
Yeah, with a.
And the bleed was.
The mics were shoved under the lid. The lid was as closed as we could get it, and then a packing blanket over the lid, and it worked pretty good. We kept the bleed out pretty good.
Worked really well.
It's easier when you have a bigger room like that too, because you can put guys.
I'll see if I can find some of those photos because it was pretty bitchin' actually. All right, why don't we get the guys out? We'll do a little funky jam.
Okay, so now here's our drum sound. We'll start with the whole thing. So there's a little guitar in there, but not too bad. I don't have any processing on the drums. There's no compression or anything. Very basic. I'll start turning stuff off. So there's our single kick drum. So it's got snap, but you still get some of the front head in there. I'm gonna sit down so you can see me. That's the top snare mic. There's a little bit of 10K. That's about it. I'm using all console EQ. Again, it's about speed and versatility. It's just getting sounds happening in a very limited amount of time and being able to change stuff on the fly. So I try and do as much on the console as possible. Bottom snare, barely using it. Together. I have the high pass filter on the bottom snare mic on as well. Keep this as much kick drum out of it as possible. There's our PR30 on the hi-hat. Hey Charlie, we should demo moving the PR30 like after we're done real quick. We should do that. I do have a bunch of low end rolled off. That's the only other EQ I'm really using. Let's see if Nick hits the toms here. So that's the bleed on the tom. Oh, here we go. We hit a rack tom. Pretty good rejection from those PR30s. Here's the overheads. This is a very sort of cymbal-centric overhead sound. This is the thing Charlie and I always argue about. Should the overheads capture the whole kit or a lot of cymbals? In this case, I'm getting a lot of cymbals. All right, here's
I lost out on this one.
Yep. Here's the bass. Again, that's just the Music Man straight into a little Abs DI with a little bit of compression. How much compression am I pulling? Yeah, 6 or 8 dB in the most, 4 to 1. So that's about it. And you know, I'm just basically like looking to keep my levels in check as much as anything else. And that's another thing when you're working like this. It's good to be conservative with levels because you very rarely get more than a couple of takes, so there's no going back one more for the engineer. Like that's the last thing anybody wants to hear. I've gotten the looks of death from musicians for, sorry, one more. And then here's Ernesto. So super reverb, the fat head, it's pretty clean, little crunch. And that's basically the whole thing. Now, there are some, I'm gonna have the guys stop. Okay, guys, hang on one sec. Oh, tight ending, I like it. That was like, you guys are like the Gong Show band. That's great. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the session. So there are some pre-recorded elements. I'm gonna play it back once. Sort of the demo version with all the pre-record stuff. Hey guys, I'm gonna play this cue back one time, just with all the demo stuff in it, so hang tight. So we'll hear the fake drums, the fake guitar. It's actually half like fake MIDI guitar and half me, just doing it real quick. And then the fake bass, and then there's some organ, there's some electric piano, there's some synth effects. Those are all keepers. The guys are playing along, we're keeping all that stuff. So this is what the demo sounds like. Very MIDI. Those are all just expand patches. The drums are very quickly edited loops, basically. That's the whole cue. A lot of these cues for film and TV too, a lot of times when you're listening to them divorced from the picture, sometimes they don't make a lot of sense. There's like weird, there's weird numbers of bars, or there's, a bar of 5 for no good reason, or there's, these 6 measure phrases, or, changes that don't seem to have any reason to happen when they do. But with the picture, it makes sense. But that doesn't make it any easier for the musicians when they're sight reading this stuff. So it's really a high level skill to be able to play some of this stuff, because you got to be ready for anything, and you rarely get more than a couple shots at it. So now, and I was going to talk about the click. So obviously this is all built on a grid. We have a click going. I have it on a fader here. I usually keep it muted because I don't want to hear it. And also by not listening to it, it's going out to the musicians obviously, but I can't hear it. So I know if I do hear it, then it's leaking from somebody's headphones, and I can do something about it. That's pretty important. So, I'll play the click, I'll unmute it. Here, I'll play it once real quick. So there's 4 clicks at the top of the cue. Wait, here we go. And we're in. So that's what the musicians are hearing. But once I know the click is working, I generally mute it and I ignore it from that point on. It's the conductor, whoever's sitting out there, will hear the click. So if somebody's getting off, which is pretty rare with the kind of musicians we're talking about usually, they'll call it. They're mocking me, I think. But the click, is essential for all of this. All these cues are gridded out, and there might be, tempo changes. Sometimes you have one tempo ending, another tempo starting, so then you have to have clicks in advance of that new tempo, so the musicians have the tempo ahead of time. That all that stuff can get complicated. And again, that's where preparation comes in. All these sessions have to be very carefully prepared before time.
Yeah, that's one thing, you guys, with this. I'm going to get over here in this. I'm going to pop in. Woo-hoo.
Hey, Charlie.
That I want to mention, too, is sometimes this stuff doesn't make that much sense when you're hearing it. Or when you're just tracking it without the picture. I know there was a particular show that we did some work on for Disney that we had kind of a round robin going where this was way back in the day at my old studio where Scott was at his studio in Burbank, Charlie was at his studio in Burbank, and I was at my studio in Hollywood. Charlie would temp everything out, would go to Scott to make sure it was all right, would go back up to the cloud. I would pull it down and track. And I remember some of those being, I'm sitting there going, are they deaf? What the hell is going on here? Because I have a giant SMPTE because the click wasn't any help. So I literally was watching the SMPTE code to try to know when I was going to change things. But a second I saw it after I put it back up. Scott writes, Charlie writes, they get it all done. Scott mixes it. And then I see it with the picture. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, then it makes perfect sense. Yeah, and usually on sessions like this, they're running the picture, so the musicians usually can't see it. It's usually on a screen behind the musicians because they got other things to look at, their music and stuff. But usually, at least the conductor can see it, so he knows if it's grooving with the picture.
Right. Hence the conductor stand out.
Yeah,
there
yeah.
Make
So
sure it's all right.
If you ever see pictures of like John Williams doing like a Star Wars date or something, he's at the podium and there's a giant screen behind the orchestra playing the cue. And sometimes there's visual cues in the picture too. They'll do, there'll be like punches, they call them, where they're just like dots that count you into things, or streamers where something will move across the frame so you can time it perfectly when it hits the edge of the frame. There's a cue there for something. That's kind of an old school way to do it. You don't see that as much
in
anymore.
the album making world.
Yeah.
We don't have anything that complicated.
I knew a guy, and he would go down to he went down to Conway. They were doing the songs for Ally McBeal. What was her, Vonda Shepard? Was that the Vonda Shepard songs? She'd have like a song she was doing, and they would go in, and they were doing some record in the other room, and he'd walk in the morning, and they'd just hear like whack, 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 getting a snare drum dialed in, whack, whack. They'd go in there and do a session, 3 hours, knock a song out, totally finished. He'd come back out at lunch, and they're still in there, whack, whack, whack.
They've scored half a TV show.
Yeah. It's instant gratification. It's an emergency room. It's like being an emergency room doctor.
Right.
It's all
so the workflow is different.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that always still impressed me was how good everything sounded in the end. So the preparation, and some of this goes with years and years of experience, but the preparation beforehand to make sure everything was ready to go. So when the musicians came in and you started hitting it, you knew that you were capturing really good sounds that when you went to mix were going to be easy to mix or tweak to make them fit the scene that you had to fit.
Yeah.
And that was cool.
Yeah.
So preparation. Prep.
Having the sessions ready to go. I mean, I've done a lot of that working for composers and stuff, and the last thing you want to do is show up at a session with a session that isn't right. Like there's a bar missing or the tempo's wrong. There's so many things that can get messed up, and it's absolutely impossible to undo it. You basically, like, if there's a problem like that, you basically have to skip that cue, go on to the next thing, and then someone has to take it and fix it, and hopefully they can put it back in the rotation, like after lunch, or something like that. Yeah, it's no good.
All right, shall we
all right, you want
guys in and start
to take a crack at this cue? Okay, guys, I think we're ready to try a take here. So now I've muted all of the temp drums, the temp bass, the temp guitar, and now we're going to replace it with actual human beings, which is going to sound so much better. And they're still going to play along with the organ, the electric piano that we just heard before. That stuff is all staying put. That's a very common thing to have pre-recorded tracks that the musician, stuff from the composer's studio that the musicians then have to play along with. That's a thing as old as time. In fact, back in the pre-Pro Tools days, we used to have, like when I first started working as a composer lackey, we had a big rack full of synths, and the composer would write away on those. And then you would get the demos signed off on, and then we'd do a session with live guys. We'd actually take the racks of synths, rack them, pack them all up, schlep them over to the studio, set them all up, and lock it up to the picture, and all those synths would fire off with the sequencer running while the musicians were playing along with it. And that was, talk about nail biting. It was very easy for the very delicate, like we had a Macintosh, I think it was an LC2, like that's how long ago this was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so running performer, feeding all these samplers that had to be loaded up with sounds for every cue. Yeah, that was, recording on the D88s with SMPTE running everything. That was good time.
I hope I never have to hear the word D88
Or ADAT.
or ADAT. ADAT's even worse.
Yeah. I made a few records on ADATs.
Me too, unfortunately.
Yeah, back in the day.
All right.
All right, so let's take a stab at this cue. Okay, guys, let's give it a shot. All right, great. So that was take one. So now we're going to do take two, and that's it. That's how these things go down. Like, in a session like this, usually you have, sorry guys, hang on one second, I'm going on a rant. You have a 3-hour window. It's called it's a single, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. You got union musicians on the clock, so like every guy in the room made at least $250 to roll out of bed. And the union rules state that you can record up to 15 minutes of music in that span of time. And usually you are recording 15 minutes of music in 3 hours. So if you just do the simple math, you have, maybe 4 takes and you're done, at the most. If it's a bigger project, sometimes you do what's called a double. So that's a 3-hour session from 10 to 1, hour break for lunch, and then 2 to 5, another 3 hours. And then it's usually understood that there's an extra hour at the end where the musicians remain available in case there's some overtime. And, you can do half an hour of music, basically. And very often for, a whole film, you can knock out, the entire film score in 2 days of, 2 double sessions a lot of times. So it's an enormous amount of music to go through, and you need fine musicians to be able to knock it out. So we're going to do one more take, and then we'll probably be okay. And if there's any issues, maybe we'll punch in on it and we'll see. Okay, guys, let's try one more take. I always warn, before I roll, I always warn the musicians that it's coming because they got 4 clicks and then they're in. So it's always good to give musicians a little verbal warning right before you roll. So here we go. Okay, here it comes. All right, thanks guys. All right, and then we move on to the next cue and the next cue and the next cue for the next 3 hours until the show is done. And it's not even 3 hours because you get a 10-minute break every hour too. So it's
right.
3:50. It's like going to a shrink.
I remember doing 18 songs a day with you for 3 days straight, with 3 drum sets set up in the room.
Yeah. And
literally 3 entirely different sets.
And we didn't even have the union to worry about in that
Nope.
one. Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah. So that's how we do it. Now I'm gonna go. You guys all good with that? Anybody got any issues? Of course they say no, because they nailed it. And then yeah. So at this point we would move on to the next cue, right, guys? Right.
Kevin's like, what? Next cue. All right, hey, Scott, I got one question.
Okay.
Felipe's asking if you are using only the headset to equalize or if you're monitoring in the box. The headset, just so you guys know, the reason why we're using the headphones is so we don't have to have the monitors on loud during the broadcast. So we can talk and everybody can hear things without phase issues with coming back into the lav mics. However, all the sound check before was done with Scott using his Tannoys.
Oh yeah, these are my beautiful Tannoy 600As that I love so much with their cool blue lights.
And I believe when you're EQing, it's all by ear. You're not looking at anything in the box. You're not using any sort of analyzers or anything, right?
No, I'm just, like it sounds a little dark, brighten it up. I mean, the rolling off the low end on the hat, I almost always do that because you don't want all that garbage in there anyway. I'm trying to keep it as simple and mixable as possible. If I want to get weird, I want to do it when I'm mixing. Because ultimately, it's not up to me. Aesthetically, if I'm just the engineer, it's not up to me how this stuff should sound. It's up to the composer, and then up to the producer, director, whoever's in charge of the show. So making any sort of bold moves sonically while you're recording is just asking for trouble, because then,
it's not an album.
Yeah, it's not an album. So if you make a bold choice while you're mixing, you can undo it and you can change it, because all this stuff gets, it gets updated and changed and critiqued, and multiple people can have conflicting. It's not unusual for us to play cues for one producer and he says, I like this one, I like this one, I like this one, I don't like this one, and then play it for the next producer who says, I hate all the cues except that one, which was the one the other guy didn't like. That stuff happens all the time. So you have to keep it as flexible as possible for as long as possible. So you can go back and, I almost always get notes. Like when I do mixes, send it to the composer's going to have notes, because it's not, it's not my cue. If I'm
kind of like when you're mixing and you get notes from the band over and over.
Except you have to have it all done by dinner time.
Right.
Yeah. So we keep it clean. I don't use a ton of plugins at this point. When it's time to mix, then I'll start throwing on the plugins. Templates are very important, so you can set stuff up very quickly. You're not setting up all your sessions from scratch all the time. You got to have some sort of template. Every show is a little different. It's like, hopefully when you're doing like a television series and you're doing sessions, every week you're doing a session, you kind of get into a groove after a while, and it becomes sort of like clockwork. Depends on but it all depends on the show. It's all different. Different composer, different aesthetics, different combinations of musicians, different goals. So everyone's a little bit different.
Yep. All right, hold on one second. I'm gonna go. I got to get to the guys real quick.
All right. Charlie is now running full speed out to the. There he goes.
Nick's out here talking. I'm out here at the mic now. I got to say huge thanks to my good buddy Kevin Chown, Dr. Kevin Chown, because he's a doctor. Yes. Dude, you've had brain surgery, man. You a doctor.
I ain't no doctor.
Nick Adams, who I've known forever. Dude, thank you for being here. And Ernesto, as always. You guys know Ernesto. He kicks freaking ass. And Scott, I ran from the control room in here just because I wanted to mention this. He's going to come out now. But I got to say, huge thanks to him. Scott was there when I started doing all of this. I would be calling him at all hours of the day, sometimes midnight, 12:30. Hey, man, you still up? And he always answered the phone. He's probably regretting that now, like 20 years later. But he was such a huge help. Whenever I have a technical issue recording, he's the first guy I call. Whenever I have a computer issue, he's the first guy I call. The point is, surround yourself with people smarter than you. Okay. Your life would be a hell of a lot better. Amen to that. But you guys, everybody, thank you. This was cool. Do you guys want to just jam out for a second? Sure. Play a little bit of the intro and just stretch for a second? Yeah. Have a little fun? All right, I'm going to let these guys play out. Scott and I are going to go there so we don't get our ears blown out.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Thanks for having me too, Charlie.
You bet.
Your call.